All right, y'all. I want to weigh in here on this tragedy that happened last week. And it's not because I'm got all the answers guy or anything like that. In fact, one of the things that I think is missing in the whole fabric of our society, and certainly in this conversation for many people, is a sense of recognition that we don't know everything. And this is one of the ingredients I want to emphasize in this video, that I'm not here to say that I have certainty about everything, but I am here because I do want to share with you what I'm seeing and call a spade from where I sit, with the openness to be wrong and with the openness to invite the dialogue and conversation from someone who may or may not disagree with me, but either way. Another ingredient that I see missing that, again, is contributing to what I would call a disease that we're all in, and I would call the tragedy itself, the shooting, a symptom of this disease, is a lack of inclusivity. So I also want to bring that into the space. Inclusivity, inclusion, seeing ourselves in the other, seeing the other in ourselves. And lastly, a sense of conscious response, meaning not reacting, not overreacting, and processing at a speed that we can regulate. And again, these are things I need to work on just as much as anyone, because we're all creating this to some degree together, and we're all going to need to participate. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video. We all have to evolve into creating a world that's not going to be created for us without our participation. So I hope that by sharing my opinions here and my perspective, there'll be some value and we can connect a little bit better, because you'll need to be able to see a little bit what's happening in my heart and mind if you want to. If I can be, if I don't share that with you, then how am I going to be open and vulnerable to evolving my perspective? And how are you going to get to know who I am, and how are we going to keep connecting? That's another piece, really, the connection. So that's really part of the inclusivity, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so let's get into it. And even though I'm bringing all those things into it, I know that some of the things I might say might sound salacious, dramatic, or divisive at this juncture, because I'm going to go into what I want to. I'm not really here to call it out, but I just am wanting to share with you what I'm seeing, and ultimately what I'm seeing at some levels is, not good, and not good at all. Meaning, one, of course, the shooting itself, lethal force was not necessary in this case. That's not what I saw, not even close. Not even close. People talk about self-defense when it comes to lethal force being necessary or warranted. There's no definition of self-defense that matches what I saw, and I watched everything. Now I'm open again to being, having bias in that, my interpretation of what self-defense is and when's lethal force necessary. However, I'm telling you, I'm being very generous. And if I gave every assumption in one direction towards self-defense, and I even embellished the details to be in favor of the shooter, I don't see it. I don't see it. So on the flip side, does that make it murder instantaneously? Again, I'm not going to jump to conclusions necessarily. I don't know that it makes it murder. Was it premeditated? I think that's a prerequisite of murder. From what I saw, it's likely that it was manslaughter, or you basically, this officer panicked, and as we have heard, he has potentially some trauma around this kind of situation already, and may not be fit for service, and may have demonstrated his unfitness in this moment. And so that's my thoughts on that, if you wanted that. Zooming up a level, what's concerning, and what's really concerning is, one, I'm not very surprised by this situation. This is part of a pattern. That's, again, why it's symptomatic of larger and larger, more far-reaching, deeper issues that we need to address. And I'm also not surprised about the response from Trump and his administration, but it's very concerning, because one, again, they're not open to this conversation. They're not demonstrating or using words and actions that demonstrate they are in pursuit of justice or the truth of the matter. They are, from what I can see, using their language and rhetoric and actions to fortify their own agendas, defend against any vulnerability, project an impenetrable sort of discussion around their own power and authority because they want to protect that. That's what I'm seeing. And that's not what they're elected to do, obviously, and so that's very concerning. And this disease that we're in, there's an autoimmune analogy I think that's happening where, we're recognizing the enemy where there is none. And, this is what happens in the body. And so, it happens at every level. This is, the universe is sort of holographic this way, right? And so it's clear that their definitions of self, whether they're making them consciously or unconsciously, are so narrow that they, this administration's not willing to act on behalf, as they were elected to, of the constituents that don't agree with their narrative. And, zooming out even further, just like to this global picture, this is a collective issue, because when you look at this, when we're trying to justify, most of the times we're trying to justify death and murder or killing of people is in warfare, and warfare is always happening between nations and on the species scale. And basically our neglect and inability or unwillingness to look in the direction of our collective shared sense of self, the universal self, the oneness, the beauty that we're all sharing. Like, this is all part of the thing that we should be defending when we're talking about self-defense. Everything and every part of life is part of self at one level. And by not looking in that direction, you're getting a lot of pathological decision making. And again, that's like that autoimmune sort of disease where there's, what is it? Basically, like, you're not able to recognize yourself in the other, and you're not able to recognize the other in yourself. And so you see an enemy where there isn't one, and you see a division where there doesn't need to be one. And so this is where we're moving through, collectively. And I think for people that are caught off guard by these kinds of events, that's partly what they're blind to, is the collective and the trajectory of life. And again, I'm not here to predict, and I don't know, but what I sense is that, we're moving from a very ancient paradigm of survival. There's an immense amount of momentum behind it, but it's run out, and you can see that it's running out as everything erodes that surrounds that. And, this erosion of the law, for example, and the rule of law, and it's getting paper thin. The ice is getting thin. There's ice behind me here. And the heat is turning up on the future, which is, I don't know how far into the future this is, but when we look at the global situation, and the reason why an organization like ICE exists, for example, is to allegedly deal with immigration. And I say allegedly because obviously let's not speculate, but there's potential other things that, other agendas at play there. And the immigration problem is, again, it's a global problem, and it's a global collective shadow that we are willing to exploit each other to such an extent, and willing to turn a blind eye to such an extent that people are desperate to leave their nations, their places of birth. People don't want to do that, right? They would rather have great lives, but they're so desperate that they're coming to America in droves for a chance of hope. And my sense of hope, which I'll try to end on here, because we don't want to get too bleak, and I think again, we don't need to. One of the things that we need to do is connect with each other and remain in our joy and remain in our power, because as again we can see, which is evident when we get sucked into the fear, we get sucked into reactivity and panic, tragedy happens. And we need conscious response, and we need joy, and we need to start building that world ourselves, right? So the future and the hope that I'm kind of like alluding to and where we're going, we've come from a violent historic past of exploitation and using power to serve a narrow sense of self. Well, we're going to expand that sense of self, essentially, is where I'm heading. And we're going to get to a point where there's actually going to be no need for these borders, because when we live in a beautiful world, we don't have immigration problems. We don't have poverty and disparity to such a degree that this is the issue that it is. And I'm not saying we're just going to leap there overnight and it's going to be easy, and that there's not work to be done, and that there's not real issues that we need to address at every level, not just like this grand, okay, it's fun to be idealistic, right? But ultimately, that is where I sense the direction and for humanity. That's really the only place it can go, because what we're seeing is clear that this is an unsustainable trajectory that is curving. And anyway, much love to all of you guys. I hope you found some value in this video, and I hope to see more of you in real life. And who knows what's going on in these comment sections. Sometimes I'm like, this can't all be human, right? And so let's make sure that we connect in the real world and continue building it there, because that's where it really is lived. So all right, I love you. Take care. Bye.